one of the questions that I get most is related to the taxation of trusts. So today we're going to discuss a basic overview of how trusts are taxed. So let's get into it. All right, so how are trusts taxed? Ultimate answer is it depends. So you'll often hear me talk about trust, and I'll say that there's two types of trust: a revocable trust and an irrevocable trust. All right, for tax purposes, there's a grantor trust and a non-grantor trust. So that means that your revocable or your irrevocable trust is going to be a grantor or a non-grantor trust for tax purposes. All right, we're going to start with a non-grantor trust. What is a non-grantor trust? Again, it's a tax status. So a non-grantor trust means that the trust itself is a taxable entity. So any income tax activity that happens inside of that trust is going to be reported by that trust. It's going to be attributed to that trust. So that trust ends up having to complete a Form 1041. That's the tax return number, the form number. Individuals, they fill out a 1040 each year, or a couple is filing together, they fill out a 1040. So, but the trust itself reports taxable activity on the 1041. Now, something that's interesting and worth noting is that if there is taxable activity inside a non-grantor trust, or income tax, I should say, and that income, or that I should say income, if there is income that is attributed to the trust, to the non-grantor trust, and it gets distributed to a beneficiary, the trust, the non-grantor trust, doesn't pay tax on that income. It's the responsibility of the beneficiary who received that income to pay tax on it. So even though the non-grantor trust is a taxable entity, it's responsible for income tax. If it doesn't retain the tax but distributes it to a beneficiary, the beneficiary is responsible for it. All right, so that's the non-grantor trust. Usually, I'll say this, usually you see irrevocable trust as non-grantor trust. It could be a grantor trust, and most all revocable trusts are grantor trust. Okay, so now let's talk about what a grantor trust is for tax purposes. So when we say a trust is a grantor trust, we're saying that the taxable activity that happens inside that trust flows straight through the trust. The trust itself is not a taxable entity. It doesn't report any income tax. It flows through, similar to a disregarded entity or a single member LLC. It goes straight to the person who's assigned as the grantor. Usually the grantor of the trust is going to be the person who set it up, the settlor. That isn't always the case. Sometimes it could be someone else. We won't go into great detail about that. But ultimately what you need to know is that the grantor trust is going to push all of the income through, even if it retains the income in trust and doesn't distribute it to a beneficiary. The person who's designated as the grantor is going to report all of that taxable income on their 1040 tax return each year. So, grantor, non-grantor, grantor pushes all the taxable income through to the person who's designated as the grantor. That person ends up being responsible for taxable activity. A non-grantor trust is a taxable entity. Any income tax or any taxable activity that happens inside that trust is reported on that trust 1041 each year.